And an example of that is currently some of, I've said this before and I'll say it again, the people working on the vaccine at Oxford. I'm convinced at this stage that we will look back on what they achieved in such a short period of time. At some point in the future, we will look back on what they've achieved in such a short period of time in the same way that we look at how we got men on the moon and how we've, kind of, changed global communication through, you know, through the internet, genuinely how they did that. And I guess there's two parts to that to consider though. Well, how can they do that? Because COVID-19 is a novel virus. Well, it is a novel virus, but there's a lot about it that is similar to other coronaviruses and SARS. Also, a lot of what happens the, as a consequence of having COVID-19 is also very well known to us. So things like the trauma and interference that occurs at a cardiovascular level, the kind of thing that we see manifest on the lung, this kind of things that we see happen neurologically with regards to the hemoglobin, with regards to the impact it has on the vital organs. Well, these are all things that are very, very familiar to us. And also, as a virus, whilst it's mutated at least twice and we expect further mutations, other viruses also mutate. Hence why there is a seasonal vaccine, the seasonal flu vaccine. So it is a novel virus, as in its particular permeation has never come across before. But there's lots of ways in which it behaves that have similarities with other things that we do have an understanding of. And another point to be brought back to is, whilst there's expertise, and I do believe that this is outstanding expertise, is working on the vaccine approach. They're not exercise specialists. They are not experts of exercise rehabilitation. What they are tasked to do is to combat this and to counteract it on a antiviral level. And I personally believe they're doing that excellently. So what we need to look at is, one, recognition and identification of what we don't know, the known unknowns, and then we need to identify the known knowns, the things that we can do, the things that we do know and have an extended knowledge and skill set about. And that all comes into looking at the pathology of cellular and tissue damage that happens in the wake of chronic disease, chronic conditions, and other viruses, and saying, okay, then we manage this that way. Some of it is explorative, because even our term now, long haulers, long COVID, this is new language because they're new terms for us. But again, I guess it depends where you've been for the past 20 years, Mel. For me, this is the rock I've been living under. This is the fight I've had on my hands with regards to how we long-term manage the rehabilitation of people who've had various types of cancer, how we long-term manage the rehabilitation of people who've had various types of cardiovascular disease and condition, how we manage long-term aspects of type 1 diabetes, and then also the prevention and reversibility of type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome. So I understand that right now some of this seems like it's brand new to people, saying, wow, we've got to manage things long term. It's not a 12-week intervention. It's never been a 12-week intervention, Mel. It's always been a lifestyle change. It's always been about, right then, you've been successfully medically treated. If you want your life back, we need to look at long-term rehabilitation. We need to look at a change in how we manage ourselves. We need to look at making better choices, because we do know epigenetically, we know, pathologically, systemically, the things that we can change, we can improve through good nutrition, through physical activity, through exercise compliance. We know all the stuff that does. That is not new. And we add to that understanding every single year. And on a research point of view, when I'm with my kind of research peers, yes, we debate stuff and we analyze stuff and we test things and we go, well, what about this? This doesn't seem to stack up. A recent one that came across for me that I was involved with over the weekend was looking at the difference between supplemental antioxidants versus dietary antioxidants, and the role that the difference that can make with regards to certain types of cancers. There's systematic review and evidence out there that says supplemental antioxidants actually increase mortality and do very little to suppress symptoms, whereas we know that dietary antioxidant profile, increased and sufficient, has a really positive effect. One, in the preventables when it comes to cancer, and secondly in the recoverables and in the rehabilitation. So yeah, we debate all that stuff over there, and we debate all that stuff so that the best information can inform practice. But right through the middle of that, Mel, we've got decade after decade of best practice, of stuff we've figured out, and how to do rehabilitation better. And rehabilitation really is just the term for that person who's dealt with X. And in this context, it's COVID-19. So the COVID-19 SARS virus has done whatever it's done, whatever your severity and duration of symptoms were. And we need to pick this individual up from here. And we need to look at that individual and say, well, what's been the catalogue of consequences? Has it affected them from the lung? Has it affected cardiac tissue? Has it affected neurological tissue? Has it affected the hemoglobin? Are we got any concerns over kind of other long-standing neurological issues? Any damage, any known damage or traceable damage to those vital organs? What are the symptoms we get? And what kind of levels of prolonged debilitating levels of fatigue are we getting? Right then, let's stack all those up, because we've got an exercise and a lifestyle solution to improve these. Even if we can't cure them, we can improve them. And by improving them, we can improve that person's quality of life. So that question is completely legitimate. And more people will ask it, and more people will do well to ask it, because this brings the meaningful part of the conversation to the forefront. Why aren't we doing this better already in other contexts? Now is the time to put our hands up and go, right then, we can do all of this better. And in fact, as I've said for 2 decades now, the fitness industry, the health industry is where it should be done. Because the acute clinical aspect, our partners, our colleagues working cold front don't have the resources and don't have the time. They're the ones who are there to do the crises management, the life-changing, life-saving, heat of the moment stuff. And the rest of it is a person's journey throughout the rest of their life as to how they manage themselves in the context of it. So yes, COVID-19 is a novel virus. And with that, there are things that we've yet to find out. But there's been a whole heap of stuff that we have found out. And I'm really fortunate because of the research groups that I'm aligned to that go from everything from clinical medicine to clinical research to nutritional, all the way across to exercise, you name it. I'm very fortunate that that's where I get to pivot. I have colleagues who are working in that, and some of those colleagues are world leading. They're exceptional. And I get to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, as well as working through the middle on the own projects that I'm involved in, whether that's been things across Greater Manchester Health Innovations with regards to cancer and type 2 diabetes, whether that's been across Cheshire with Active Cheshire and looking at those physical activity interventions and changes, whether that's been liaising with people out in Harvard, whether it's been working on disaster medicine study, Mick Malloy, whatever it is, that's where I get to pivot. And it's been really a benefit and an asset to us in these specific times, because as that information, as those findings have emerged, we've been able to have our finger on the pulse and see what's coming along. When it was time to be more cautious, that was our message. And even now, our message is around making sure you know what the complexities are, know the full scale of the unknowns, but more importantly, focus on those knowns, the things that we can do that done right can only improve that person's circumstances. And as we've said right from the start, Mel, this is an opportunity for people to have their interest piqued, their awareness heightened because of what COVID-19 has brought to the world. And what we want to do is have better conversations about cardiac, cancer, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, neurological, COPD rehabilitation, because we need to be doing all that better as well. So for us, it's a twofold approach, isn't it? And that's where we're at, and that's why I can confidently put forward that the standards that we're putting in place, the guidance that we're offering, the methods that we are endorsing are right now, one, safe, more importantly, safe and effective.
Well put. And because the question was asked in the context of the rebuild course, it's probably useful to highlight for that person that because the course isn't fast, i.e. it's updated regularly as required, as we learn more and have more access to the information via you as to what is relevant, what's changed, what's new, we can update the course as relevant or put new bits in there or take stuff out if required. But this is our foundational guideline of how to help people right now.
That's right. It was never designed to sit on a shelf, Mel.
Yeah.
You know, it's not Shakespeare. You know, it's the idea is that program will be updated as new findings emerge. The interesting bit so far is that since we did the first version of it, the best information to come forward has only confirmed what we've put in place. So the very latest information over the past 6 to 8 to 12 weeks has only endorsed and confirmed all the more what we put in place in the first instance. You know, people are now talking about long COVID and going, wow, we heard about long COVID, long haulers, which was a conversation we were having with people back in March and April. You know, and we were fortunate enough to be so close to the emergence of that information that we could put that into the syllabus and into the curriculum and into that program, the rebuild program, right from the start, because we knew it was about, you know, colleagues of ours who were working right in the coalface, in the trenches, and those who were most immersed in the research were already using that terminology and having those conversations back in April. So we were really lucky because, again, that's where we get to pivot. So we were mindful of that and we knew what was emerging and the long-term implication of it. And also for me, this notion of a long hauler and a long-termer, again, is nothing new. I've been dealing with long haulers and long-termers in the context of various different types of cancer and cardiac rehabilitation for 20 years, for 2 decades. So it's nothing new to me and it's no surprise. I think what's happened here, Mel, and I'll come back to the main point in a minute. I think what's happened here now is that it's so headline, it's so main feature, it's so the current topic of conversation that it's being spoken about. So therefore being spoken about in far more multifaceted ways. 2 years ago, a year ago, no one on TV or on the news was having the debate and saying, do you know what? 33% of people who've had cancer are left with debilitating levels of fatigue after 3 years. That conversation wasn't taking place. There was an assumption was, bang, you had your meds, you fixed, go home and enjoy the rest of your life. And that's never been the truth. Speak to anyone who's had to deal with it. What COVID has done is it's raised the tone, it's raised the volume on the conversation. So people are having to use terms like long COVID and long hauler. I actually welcome that because I think it's going to put more of the spotlight on things. But yeah, that course is organic, it's live, and the minute the next bit of vital information that improves what we can do and how we can do it comes along, that will be put into that program, whether it's something that I have to contribute or whether we get that world leading expert to contribute that part of the module themselves. But the minute something new comes up that changes the way in which we need to support people, then that program updates.
Agreed. This isn't meant as a provocative question by the person that's entertained, but what are our thoughts, and your best position to answer this over me? What are our thoughts on the government's £10 million investment into satellite rehabilitation centres?
Yes, and I appreciate it's not meant to be a provocative statement. Yeah, I welcome, if you give us a quid, give us £10, 10 million, lovely stuff. It's a drop in the ocean. It's a drop in the ocean, isn't it? But you know what? It's the right sentiment and it's money in the right direction. But it's chicken feed, isn't it, in reality? And actually, the situation that really needs to be fixed is about upskilling people where they are within communities, within an existing infrastructure. And again, it goes back, there's a twofold approach to this, in my opinion. One is getting a clear message across the population that they need to take ownership of their health. Not just about COVID, but about everything. We need to be more mindful about the choices we make and the impact they have on our health, because we are living ever more in a society that is abound with sickness. So we need to break that. We need to change that narrative. But right now, in the context of COVID-19 and rehabilitation from it and support, what needs to happen is that people, the best people, who in my opinion are coaches and personal trainers and instructors who are at your local gym, whether that's an independent gym or a corporate gym, but they're within your community, within your ecosystem. And what you can do is you can go and you can exercise and be motivated and supported in an inspiring atmosphere and environment by people who are passionate about what can be done with an understanding of the complexity and the pathology and the contraindications, but have a clear route out and how to support you through your restoration, rehabilitation, into the realignment of your goals. It's not about a centre for rehab in this place, that place, and this place. We've got decades worth of history that shows that they bring about geographical limitations, they bring about waiting lists. How are we going to staff it? How are we going to resource it in the long term? 10 million, what is that for capital build? What the reality is, it's not going to be what happened within 2020 and 21 or 2020, 2022. You know, it's got a longer tail than that. And to me, don't get me wrong, I welcome any investment in our area. And if we're going to build an all singing, all dancing rehabilitation centre that is going to be based off excellence, pioneering with its research and practice, brilliant, superb. I'm all for it. But that's not who's that going to help? You know, how many people from, you know, Moss Side? How many people from Toxteth? How many people from, you know, inner city parts of Glasgow, Edinburgh, London? How many are we going to build off 10 million? How many are we going to build? How many are we going to resource, kit out, sustain, staff? It's
the second thing, like just to touch on what we were just talking about in our last meeting, it's with that whole workforce element, surely there's a finite number of staff within an NHS provision that are available to support. Whereas to your point, exactly as you said, as a sector, we've already got a workforce ready to go that spans the entire country, and there's 30,000 or more of them.
And where are the exercise experts in the NHS? I mean, the experts. I know there are some great people working in various types of rehab. I was an exercise clinical, exercise physiologist myself. And I know that there's some great people doing some great stuff, but where are the experts? Where was the last thing that any of us read or was informed by from a leading NHS exercise expert? And I don't get me wrong, I know physiotherapy do a great job. The fact is that when we look at the diversity and we look at the specific skill set that is aligned to exercise professionalism, well, we've got them. We've got tens of thousands of them all over the country, working in everything from someone's garage gym all the way through up into those huge big corporate gyms. We've got stacks of them. They're keen, they're motivated, they're inspiring, they invest in themselves, they continue. You know, if you look at the standards across our profession with regards to how the average PT, coach, instructor conducts themselves with a continued investment in their own CPD, we don't need to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
That 10 million will be better spent on giving all those people all over the country the access to training, resourcing. You know, spend that 10 million on paying for individuals to have some of their time. That's what you should spend that 10 million on. Spend that 10 million, divide it all up across the country so that every single person who comes under that umbrella term gets the opportunity of to get them started and for them to experience and see the difference of working with a true exercise professional, and then what they get back from that. That's how you should spend that £10 million. That's far better than building something else that, you know, everyone's got their own take on it, and I'm sure their motivation was in the right way. I just think it's misguided spending. I think there's a better way to spend it, and I also think that the fix is a long-term fix. We don't need a building that will function and offer more generic 12-week interventions. What we need is a social system whereby those exercise professionals understand the context of where these people are coming from and are more confident and better armed to support them and bring about life-changing factors for those individuals.
Agreed. This is also slightly topical. brought on by Boris Johnson's current isolation. If anybody, if anyone's had COVID already, and this is really a GP question, but since we've been posed the question, and I know you're going to know the answer, I'm floating it now. If I've already endured COVID-19, either I'm pretty 99% sure that I have based on the symptoms that I've been through, or I've been tested positive, how likely am I to get it again?
Well, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's two factors to that. One, we're coming more and more to terms with the fact that, a bit like other seasonal flus, there is nothing to say that once you've had COVID-19 that you can't contract it again. However, the latest research on that area has started to look at the prevalence of antibodies in the immediate term, and this notion that's common with other types of virus is that there's a period by which that strain of the virus, or that mutation as people are often using in this term, you have a resilience and a greater capacity to fend that off whilst that version of it is doing the rounds. This is a very, very simplistic way to describe it. So acutely, you have this increased antibody profile. So there's this period in which you're far less likely to be able to be infected with the same virus again. The other thing, though, that's still being debated across the research and clinically, is the notion of the dormant virus aspect of it. And dormant virus is nothing new either. So other viruses behave this way, whereby we are no longer symptomatic. We feel like we're okay, and we feel like we're recovering, when in fact there is an aspect of the virus still active, or kind of like hibernating, dormant within us, and that with sufficient amount of the wrong type of stress, that can be enough for the immune system to not be able to respond, and it re-stirs it up. So these are things that people should quite rightly be concerned of. What I would encourage everyone to do right now is to think, stick to the basics. So, and I know this is going to cause controversy, when you're outdoors, if you're out and about and you're close to groups, wear a mask. Just wear a mask. Keep on top of your hand washing and create space. Try not to get too up and close and personal with people. We can preserve physical distancing within the gym, within the exercise space, and we can coach really effectively within that. We can sanitize, we can control that environment really, really well. So have confidence going into that environment, but do your basics really, really well. Don't go out your way to have unnecessary physical interaction and contact with people, i.e. just visiting people off the hoof. For now, just keep yourself more remote. Once this current version of lockdown restrictions ease a little bit, and who knows, we might go back into a tiered response. If people kept, look at the best epidemiological data that there is out there. If people just kept to the basics of physical distancing, wearing the mask, washing their hands, sanitizing, we could actually manage this whole situation much, much better. So whether you've had it or not, I guess what I'm saying is, whether you've had it or not, for now, behave as though you could potentially be infected. Just behave that way for yourself and for the sake of the people around you, with regards to the minimizing the risk of spreading infection. Just behave that way. On the other hand, if you're showing no signs of symptoms, no increase in temp, none of the common things that we see around it, and you feel well, then you should be going about working upon your fitness and your health, and taking that opportunity to, one, make sure that you're functioning really well, that your immune system is working as effectively as it possibly can, that you're making food choices and physical activity and exercise choices that will limit the severity of the symptoms that you're likely to encounter. And if you have any comorbidities, such as type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular cancer, now's the time to start again embracing all those practices and doing something about it. The whole reason why the self-isolation feature comes across, and that the extremity of it is arguably a broader socio-political debate, which I would be reluctant to get drawn into here. What I would say is, if we could just be patient, if as a society right now if we could all just keep to the basics. As I've already listed, I'm confident we could manage this better and therefore bring an end to this acute stage sooner.
Okay, last element, which sort of blends into that theme as well. Again, we're not a GP surgery, but the questions have come up and I think we might be well placed to tackle them. So, somebody who has actually tested positive for exercise, had no major symptoms, in their mind recovered, but this is all within the time span of a month. Had no major symptoms, pretty minor, a few headaches, that was it. When they felt better, pursued their usual lifestyle, including fitness at the level that they're used to. Now they've got what they feel is the onset of flu-like symptoms. So could we say that that's an example of an aggravated system that wasn't restored after the first phase? Is that scenario that you just spoke to, potentially?
Right, it's really difficult to discuss individual cases when it comes to anything health-wise, but because in that instance, it could be that it is that. It could be that they are now, because for whatever reason, they could be encountering one of the more common seasonal flus. It could be that because they've had a flirt with COVID, had low-level symptoms for a short period of time, their immune system's still not functioning great, and therefore what we're seeing are signs and symptoms of a cold that are quite exasperated purely because they're quite run down and not as over their COVID as they thought they were. Or it could be that there was some level of dormant viral, and that there's a restirring of their COVID, their active COVID-19. So it could be any of those things. What I will say to anyone is don't follow that pattern of behavior. If for whatever reason, whether you've tested positively or you've just had the clear symptoms that say to you, I've had COVID-19, loss of sense of smell, increased temp, all those kind of things that we know are common features of it. Right, if you go, right, I've had COVID, but your symptoms were really mild and they were short in duration, you don't wait till you're symptom free and go, that's it then, it's back to life. You go, no, I've had COVID-19. This kills people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my time grading my physical activity and exercise back up. No matter how lightly you feel like you got off with it, the more sure the route you take away from it, manage it, be modest in your expectations, build it up based off how you feel. And what we're looking for is a clear indication every day that we're moving in the right direction. So what we don't want to do is take on something so overwhelmingly demanding that we go, oh, wipe me out, or wasn't ready for it. No, that shouldn't happen at this stage. In this acute stage, we should be building up within tolerances that we know we can achieve and recognize. And I use this analogy a lot, and I'm not even going to apologize for using it anymore. If you were in a car crash, bang, you would know you've been in a car crash, and therefore you would expect to go, well, listen, my body's been shook up and this has happened and I took the hip from here and I might have whiplash, whatever. Treat it the same way. Even if you're able to get out the car and you go, I'm all right, I can still walk, and you've still had that smash. So treat your body kindly. Go, no, I'm just going to take it easy. I'm going to build back up. Don't be in a rush. Just take your time, because it could be any of those things. And actually, let's say it's not COVID. Let's say it's not dormant virus. Let's say it's not that, but your immune system's down, and so now you've caught another seasonal virus. But remember, that can be pretty severe as well. Let's say it's not a seasonal virus. It's not a seasonal flu. Let's just say your immune system's down and you've got a bad cold and the symptoms are now high because your immune system is down. Well, that can have quite dire consequences as well. So either way you look at that second wave of symptoms, it's something that we need to treat seriously. We need to take it seriously. So the minute you've had any expression of COVID-19 symptoms, tested positive, or you're pretty sure you've had it, manage your expectations, be modest with your expectations, and start to build your way out of it that takes weeks and months and not just weeks into a month.
One of the I know we're trying to avoid using analogies because we've used a lot lately, but one that I used on the weekend with a few people that were asking these questions, which is very crude, but it's how I make sense of it, is if it would be like returning to training at full pelt would be like breaking your leg and going for a run. Like, you just wouldn't do it. Like, it's that kind of, it's that fragile a situation.
That's right. Well, imagine you're a rugby player and you finish the season, you've got your off season, and then bang, first day back of pre-season, they go, right, we're going to play a full game, 80 minutes against the best team in the league. You know, I've done nothing for 5 weeks, and now you want me to go, yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
It makes no sense, does it? It makes no sense. And that's exactly right. So it's like, you know, it's like fracturing, your tib, and then next week going, right, let's go and do some sprint repeats. Let's do some hill sessions.
Yeah.
No, I think they're actually they're analogies to help people. To be honest with you, Mel, I think we should be confident in using them. The fact is to remember that there's a certain amount of systemic interference and damage that happens in the wake of any kind of virus, any kind of flu. But we know that there is in the wake of COVID-19, just because of how the virus functions. So the minute we know we've had it, it's just about being patient and going, okay, let's just build this back up. And if we're getting positive after positive day in, day out, then we're heading the right way. That's great. Manage that and head the right way. That's why, Mel, that in its essence is why we need a fully understanding, skilled up, knowledgeable population of PTs and coaches, so that they can be those people, that watchful eye, that guidance for all these people who are trying to figure it out for themselves.
And as we're fielding more and more of these questions, and if you're a coach that's watching this and you want to be one of those individuals that can field these questions and help more of those people, then please drop us a message on the email below somewhere, because we need more good boots on the ground.